Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I think we'll have a few more people joining us as we go, but I think we've got so much to cover today that I don't want to waste any more time. So good morning, good afternoon, or evening, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Anna Slattery, and I am the External Affairs Manager at the Hunger Project. I'm thrilled to be hosting today's event, which is part of the Skoll World Forum's Ecosystem Day, and is wholly curated and hosted by the Hunger Project. Over the past 2 days at the Skoll World Forum, we've heard brilliant speakers and social innovators from around the world who are all talking about ways to tackle some of the biggest challenges facing society. But honestly, the voices of youth were largely missing from the conversation, with the exception of a panel or two. And that's a shame, because in this day and age, we know the power of youth. One of the most famous examples, in 2019, Greta Thunberg became an international icon of the youth climate movement. And with nearly unparalleled media attention, she brought climate action to the forefront of the global agenda. Today, there's a growing number of young women and men who are championing change. In every corner of the world, young leaders are paving the way. They are not constrained by the protocols and the processes that we've put in place to slowly progress towards change. Instead, they leverage their creativity to generate solutions, action, and hope. Today, we'll be meeting 4 young women who are leading movements for climate action in their communities and celebrating all that they've accomplished. I'm looking forward to introducing you to our panelists, but first, I'd like to introduce Jasmine Garcia, who will be co-moderating today's event. I'll turn it over to Jasmine to introduce herself and share a bit more about her own advocacy work. Jasmine?
Thank you, Anna, and thank you to everyone who has joined us today in this very important conversation about youth climate activism. As Anna said, my name is Jasmine Garcia, and I am a 4th-year international relations student at Loyola Marymount University, as well as the Hunger Project's 2022 Events and Special Projects intern. With respect to my advocacy work, I have had the privilege of sharing spaces with others to further my understanding of the world's most pressing issues, including climate change and women's rights, and to advocate for change. At the local and national level, I have partnered with other young intersectional feminists to improve the inequitable conditions of women and children through service. My fondest memory with this type of advocacy work has been witnessing the personal and collective growth of at-risk middle school students through a university mentoring program. So every spring semester when new mentees are assigned, I am reminded of the unwavering potential within each child. And at the international level, I have also met with grassroots activists from Central America to discuss the intersections of climate change, gender equality, and immigration. So together, these experiences have really taught me the importance of not only including women and children in conversations about the current state of the world, but also centering their experiences. So my hope for this forum is that we all leave with a better understanding of what constitutes good climate action, and that we continue to listen to young voices.
Thanks, Jasmine. I'm so excited to have you here with me because if I'm being really honest with myself, I am pushing the definition of youth, and it's important to have youth leaders here talking with one another. So I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Sadia Maliha. Sadia is pursuing her master's in social work at National University of Bangladesh. She's active with the Hunger Project's Youth Ending Hunger Bangladesh program, and is the co-founder of the Earth Care Initiative, a social action movement focused on raising awareness about climate change in Bangladeshi communities. The initiative was a winner of the British Council's COP26 Challenge Fund. Sadia, please go ahead and share your story with us.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone. Hi, my name is Sadia Ibnat Maliha, and I'm a climate activist from Bangladesh. Few countries on earth so exemplify the deep inequity of the climate crisis as Bangladesh. Over the last 2 decades, the Global Climate Risk Index rates Bangladesh as the 7th most affected country in the world from extreme weather events. Despite producing only 0.56% of the global emission changing our climate, Bangladesh ranks 7th on the list of countries most vulnerable to climate devastation, according to German Watch 2021 Global Climate Risk Index. rising sea levels, floods, and intensifying cyclones are just a few of the impacts that makes Bangladesh one of the most climate change vulnerable countries in the world. Increasingly supercharged water levels in the Ganga, Meghna, and Brahmaputra river basin are destroying villages and hundreds of thousands of livelihoods. Devastation that contributes over 10 million Bangladeshis already being climate refugees. As UNICEF describes, around 12 million of the children most affected by the climate change live in and around the powerful river system which flow through Bangladesh and regularly burst their banks. These are just a small part of a horrible situation. Through learning such information, my interest in environment and climate change has grown. I started reading various articles and research papers. Gradually, I've learned about different aspects and causes of climate change. In the meantime, the pandemic hit and the whole world shut down. In the pandemic time, British Council arranged an idea contest on climate change, which was called COP26 Challenge Fund. Me and some of my friends, we decided to work on our climate change problem and stuff. So we dropped a project idea to the contest. Luckily, our project plan got selected as a winner. We got funded. We started to work on creating awareness about climate change and its impact in Bangladeshi community with the help of Hunger Project Bangladesh. This dream project of ours reached out about 30,000 people in a very short time. My team and I are working on a project called Earth Care Initiative to raise awareness about climate change in the Bangladeshi community. In the meantime, I suddenly had the opportunity to join THP and the British Council's Active Citizen Program as a facilitator, working with SDG 13. Through the 15 training in that program, I became involved as a mentor with 22 social action plans. Each project is working on various different ideas. Some are working on saving endangered birds, some are working on plastics, some are working on river pollution, waste management. Numerous small groups are working in collaboration with THP Bangladesh and in different communities in the southern part of Bangladesh. Being able to work with these teams as a mentor is a huge life-changing affair for me. This program provided me an opportunity to work directly with all over Bangladesh and especially communities in the southern part of Bangladesh. Through this work, I learned more about how much people in the Bangladeshi community are aware of climate change and effects and how they respond. I got to learn about what I can do for my community to get them close to the topic of climate change, teach them about the devastating impact of climate change and help them take a steps for a better future. From the Earth Care Initiative, we are working in our community to reach as much people as possible to make them aware about our climate, our environment, how we can help ourselves to make a difference, to make our planet healthy. We reach local farmers and educate them about how they can use different methods to make their life and work a little easy for themselves and make better choices for our planet. We also advocate students from universities, motivates them to contribute their part to work on our devastating situation. And with the help of those students, we arrange different seminars, community gatherings, on awareness programs such as plastic pollution, river pollution, harmful effect of fertilizer farmers use, and how they can use natural remedies to replace those harmful stuff. Earth Care Initiative is contributing its part for a better future. We believe that if each individual put their part of effort honestly, together we can make a difference, a big difference. It's our job to help our planet to be alive. Thank you. Over to Anna.
Thank you, Sadia. I love that. It's our job to make the planet alive. So next, I'd like to welcome Michelle Maca. She is a Zimbabwean-born, Cape Town-based computer science and applied mathematics student, a debater, and an activist spreading the word about climate crisis and related issues among youth. On top of all of that, she is the operations and programs coordinator for the African Climate Alliance, a youth-led grassroots movement acting and advocating for Afrocentric climate justice. Michelle, thank you so much for being here. We're all eager to hear more about you and your activism journey. So go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. My story starts in Zimbabwe because that's where I was born and somehow ends up or is continuing in South Africa. So my earliest contact with what I now see as activism was at a very, very young age when my mother used to speak about how her mother used to make them clothes, which is something that's now encouraged by sustainable fashion and all that kind of stuff. And so my story is quite interesting in that even when growing up, I watched my grandparents from both sides of my family, my mom and my dad, really living the true principles and values of what we call now sustainability. To them, it was and is a way of life. And so, things like reusing. My grandmother used to make carpets, like little mats from plastic bags. She would just go pick up plastic bags and make these mats. And it was awesome because myself and my sister had one. And it always fascinated me. And that's how I learned some of the skills like crocheting and I don't enjoy hand sewing, but I can do it because I learned it from my grandparents. And yeah, I mean, I also just watched my grandparents partake in small scale farming and, producing their own food. And at some point, my grandmother from my mom's side was making soy milk, which is so expensive now. And I always tell her, if I could buy soy milk from the shop, it'd be so expensive. And it was just really, really great just growing up in that environment because we knew that we reused things and there was never throwing away something, especially if you knew that you could repurpose it for something else. And because I grew up in Zimbabwe, the scape is majority Black. And when I say majority Black, I'm talking about like less than 5% maybe of the population is white or other. And so growing up in the areas that I grew up in, I was always just another child. I wasn't a Black child. I wasn't, that sort of child. I was just a child. And that's how I grew up. And then in about 2010 or 11, I moved to South Africa. The first time I became aware of my skin color, the first time I became aware of inequality as it stood and still stands. South Africa has been named the most unequal society in the world. Quite recently, it was one off, and now it is the most. So coming to South Africa, I became aware of a lot of different things, and I was really just young, right? And I knew, okay, I was Black, I was different. I sounded different, which kind of made sense because then I was in a different area from where I'd lived all my life. And I, got exposed to the inequalities in South Africa in that on the one end of the road, literally on the same road, the one side would have zinc sort of structures, which is a community of people living there. And these are all over South Africa. On the other side of the road would be these mansions, these really great houses. So you could properly see the differences. And I always used to ask my parents, what is going on? Why is it the way that it is? And then I started learning about apartheid history and why the country was the way it was. But even then, I still couldn't understand why it was still that way 20, 30 years after democracy, after things were supposed to have changed. And so in high school is when I really got involved with activism. And at the time, and even now, a lot of my activism is social environmental justice because one can't exist without the other. When you speak environmental justice, you're speaking social justice and vice versa. And I really got interested, I guess, in the history of South Africa and how it came about to be like that. And it's really hurtful. It's a horror. And I that's when I got, involved with some activism stuff. And even then I didn't know it was activism stuff, right? There was a point while I was still in high school that there had been a case of somebody who had been told not to wear their natural hair out, and it had sparked a whole movement across the country. And that was when I used to wear my hair out, and got into it with some of the teachers who were trying to tell me to tame my hair. And I was like, I will not do that. And so my activism sort of just developed from there. And I decided I would stand for what I believed was right. And so came to really investigating like why things were like that and how I could play a part. Coming from a really strong support system as well really helped me, because my parents, not only do they live sustainability, they preach it indirectly. My father has this jacket he's had for more than 20 years before I was born. And I'm like, I'm an adult now. So it's always just been interesting to grow up in an environment where sustainability is practiced without it being labeled sustainability. It's a way of life. And just really supporting developing and standing for other people who might not necessarily have the same sort of access. And so through all of that, it led me to volunteering at schools. I really just did want to make a change. I felt compelled, and I started teaching maths and science. And that's when I realized I actually was passionate about education. But also because I was so interested in social issues and social justice issues, I was like, I can become a math and science and social studies sort of teacher. And that's how I got into the work that I currently do, mixing climate education, climate literacy, environmental education, as well as creating safe spaces for healing and decolonizing, because that's still a very, very important part of achieving social, climate, and environmental justice. And so that is my story. I mainly now just use decolonization as a part of my work, as a tool for climate action and producing resilient communities. Thank you. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you for sharing all that. What an interesting journey you've had. So next we'll hear from Andrea Villarreal Rodriguez. Andrea is an environmental activist and a storyteller from Monterrey, Mexico. As a filmmaker, photographer, and graphic designer, her work explores the impact of the climate crisis through an intersectional feminist lens. Her newest project, the Girl Up Mexico Storytelling Lab, was awarded a National Geographic Young Explorer grant and will provide a safe space for girls to learn the basics of documentary filmmaking under the mentorship and experienced female creators. Andrea is also an SDG Guild Youth Fellow, a climate reality leader, and the co-founder of the Escazú Ahora Mexico, an organization that advocates for the fulfillment of the Escazú Agreement, a landmark regional treaty that seeks to guarantee access to information, justice, and public participation in all environmental matters. Andy, we can't wait to hear more about your work.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Anna. I'm so honored to be here today. I love talking with you, and I love hearing your stories and just getting to know different perspectives on how we're currently living the climate crisis across the globe. So I'm very happy to share my story with you and hope it will inspire you to act towards a healthier and more sustainable planet. So as Anna mentioned, my name is Andrea. You can call me Andy. My pronouns are she, her. I'm 21 and I live in northern Mexico. And today I want to share my climate story with you. So I was born in Monterrey, the city of mountains. And in Spanish, the name literally means king of the mountains. And I've just grown up surrounded by them. And given the industrial history of my city, the whole city is basically a concrete jungle except for my mountains. And I've always felt that they were my nearest connection to nature, because probably you know Mexico from our beautiful beaches, but I live very far away from the beaches. And well, the mountains were my connection and will always be my connection to planet Earth, because their immensity is otherworldly. And even though I've hiked them countless times, I just never stop feeling completely fascinated when you reach the top and just look down at the city, right? And I completely attribute my love for the mountains to my parents, who always took me on day trips to hike them. And that's very clearly an activity we do here frequently. And unfortunately, it has gotten a lot harder to do that. And it's gotten a lot harder to admire the mountains from whichever place you stand in the city, because all you can see out the window, particularly during quarantine, where I spent 2 years looking out my window, was smog. And all you can see is smog. And the smog is so dense that the mountains that I used to marvel at from my bedroom window just completely disappeared. And they just faded into gray nothingness. There is no longer blue sky, there is just grayness. And this is in part due to the fact that Monterrey holds the title for the most polluted city in Mexico. So our air is toxic, and combined with the rise of extreme weather and the ongoing water crisis. In fact, the last time we did this panel, we still had water, but now we get our water cut off 2 days a week because there is no more water and we're struggling to ration it. So combine those factors, and I can assure you that living here will eventually be deadly because we can't breathe, we're constantly sick. Some days we're not allowed to go out, and obviously children are told to play inside. And I'm sure that face masks are here to stay, they're a reality now. And we've urged our representatives to act, to hold the polluters accountable, because there is clearly someone responsible for the air pollution in the city. And we've tried to rally citizens to join our fight, because obviously the more we are, the more they will pay attention to us. But everyone's priorities are elsewhere. And I don't completely blame them, because they don't understand that the severity of the situation, because the air quality index, the number that is constantly being published in the newspapers, is just another number to them. And I think that there lies the problem, because the climate crisis, as Michelle mentioned, is not perceived as a humanitarian crisis, a social crisis. And there is no concrete awareness of the amount of lives and livelihoods that have been lost and will be lost if we don't act now. And me being the optimist I am, I truly believe that that can change through effective storytelling. And in my case, I wish to build a better world through documentary film, a medium that I think truly has the power to broaden horizons and provoke social change. Because hearing and seeing real experiences fosters empathy and compassion and sparks much needed conversations as well. And not only do I want to make these films, I want every girl to have the opportunity to make them as well. Because through Girl Up and the climate movement, I've met dozens of fearless activists who've trusted me with their climate story. And I think there's tremendous untapped power in sharing those stories with the world and allowing girls to reach their fullest potential by providing an education and a platform to amplify their voices, not give them a voice. And I cannot stress this enough, as a person from the Global South, do not give people a voice, amplify their voices. And that is also a climate solution. So my work at the crossroads of gender equality and climate justice is what brought the Girl Up Mexico Storytelling Lab to life, which is what Anna explained just a second ago. And this passion project of mine, supported by the National Geographic Society, seeks to unite creative change makers to tackle the biggest challenge we've ever had to face through filmmaking. And during this intensive workshop that will take place during this summer, all participants will create a short film. And each piece will focus on the role of gender in environmental injustice and illuminate the ingenious ways girls are mobilizing their communities. Because we don't want to speak about the climate crisis from a perspective of doomerism. We want people to know that there is still hope, there is still joy, and what drives us is basically love for the planet and love for other people and love for well-being of others, right? So I just think it's extremely important that to highlight the fact that we deserve to tell our own stories, our own truth, because we are living the consequences of the climate crisis, and this is invaluable evidence from which we can build insights or draw insights to construct a safer, more equitable and sustainable planet. And women and girls need to contribute to this conversation, because there is no climate justice without gender justice. And quite literally, a world that is better for girls is a world that is better for all. So the amount of love I have for the climate movement is infinite. And through this collaborative effort, I have found hope and self-esteem that I had once lost in cycles of deep sadness in my room during quarantine, just staring at the window alone, right? Because quarantine. And through the Girl Up Mexico Storytelling Lab, we hope to make the diverse experiences of girls more visible. And this basically is just sums it up in the fact that we're taking collective action for our planet, just one story at a time, because the world doesn't need a handful of extraordinary activists who do everything perfectly and have absolutely no carbon emissions in their life. It just needs a billion people doing the best they can. So that's why I'm so inspired to be here with you today, and so thankful that you guys are listening to our stories. So thank you so much, and I'll give it back to you, Anna.
Thanks, Andy. I really hope that we have the opportunity to see all those films after they're produced. So be sure to circulate an invitation to the film festival. So our final panelist is Zainab Zahid. And she is an aspiring environmental scientist and a published researcher with a master's in environmental sciences. She is engaged in climate action at the national and in the international spaces, and strongly advocates for youth empowerment. She recently represented Pakistan in the 26th Conference of Parties in Scotland, and has served as a regional coordinator for the North, Central, and South Asia at the 16th UN Climate Change Conference of Youth. In that role, she mobilized young people from 14 countries in the region. It's a huge role. Zainab, please go ahead and share your story.
Thank you so much, Anna, for the introduction. And I think I'm really inspired by listening to the stories of Andrea, Michelle, and Sadia again, and it's really nice to be here. So I can pretty much relate to how Michelle described her story, because again, growing up in a traditional Pakistani family, I was always taught not to waste food and be responsible for my actions, save water. Like my grandmother would tell me not to waste water, and not to waste food and things like that. So this is something which is inculcated through our culture very unconsciously. And while I'm talking, I'm just trying to connect all these dots of how unconsciously all these cultural values inculcated the basic practices of respecting nature in us. And also, this is something which was taught at our homes and in the informal settings, but in the formal our education system, this is not something which was focused on. um, and the only thing which I remember which stayed back from the school days was the only lesson which my science teacher told, that global warming is increasing, and then there will be a time when all the rivers will run dry and the lands which are covered with glaciers which will be green, because all the glaciers will melt into water, but definitely we won't have glaciers at one time. But then, being a kid, I always thought it to be an issue of the future, and um, not being very concerned about it, definitely, because again, didn't at that time we didn't see it becoming a reality. But I think fast forward, when I chose environmental sciences for my degree, without much deliberation, I think it was a time which acted as a turning point for me, where I got to know about science-based, evidence-based research, and how, like, we definitely need, how urgent we need to take climate action. And after, when I was doing my bachelor's, got involved in some volunteer work, some internships, and then realized that I can take this cause forward and mobilize the local climate action. And this is where I think I practically started my climate action journey. So I did some volunteer work in the different organizations around me locally. Uh, got involved with some of the community-based initiatives, and also when I was doing masters in my university, I got selected as the president of the Environment Club. So this is where I got uh, that leadership position. Now at that point, I was a kind of the one who was steering all the activities of the club. So this is where we started engaging with students and also started some public awareness campaigns because we had resources there. We could mobilize it through our university. And universities being this hotspot provided us with this opportunity to basically engage people in climate education activities and disseminate the information. Because again, coming from a developing country, it's very relatable that people don't have that much knowledge about how climate change is affecting us, and they're not even bothered by it, honestly, because they're not aware of the severity of the action which we need to take. So we started different public awareness campaigns, also started organizing some different activities in universities to engage students. But there we faced some issue that students were not really interested in listening to us because they found it really boring. So we tried to then merge all such educational activities with some infotainment perspective. And this is where I realized that it's very important to bring in people from other different fields. For example, someone who is in arts, someone who is perhaps in another degree, not specifically, essentially someone needs to be in environment to take the action. And this is how I also started engaging with other people. And I think it was a time where I also joined Yongo, which is a United Nations a youth constituency to UNFCCC, engage with other peoples from different South Asian countries and from other different countries across the world, learn how they are actually mobilizing climate action in their communities and what are the good practices which I can basically implement in my community. So it helped me a lot to mobilize climate action and implementing those best practices actually in my local areas and in my communities. And later on, I also joined this United Nation International Federation for and water, and we are particularly working on SDG 6 to mobilize communities to develop basically this climate action agenda, which we are planning to forward to different agencies that they can implement it, from public sector to private sector to UN agencies to the local communities. In Pakistan, as of now, I'm working as a program coordinator for SDG 7, which is particularly on energy sector, and we are planning to launch a youth cohort soon, so that Pakistan in different advocacy activities through, I would say, energy focused lens. But definitely, it's going to be something which is also going to mobilize in general climate advocacy on climate change and climate action. Um, just to put some closing remarks for this, I would say that besides the fact that I've worked uh, from the very basic to some leadership positions, I think it was initially very difficult to put myself out there. And I think all other climate activists also relate, because due to this tokenistic approach and being that experience, being it like it seems to be very intimidating when you put yourself out there for public, because people have associated some specific, some specific approaches to the climate advocacy. But this is something which I've also learned, that there is no one way to be a climate activist. If you are perhaps a good graphic designer, you can support climate activism by designing some posts. If you are a good writer, maybe you can write articles for advocacy. If you are a good researcher, there is no one right way to be a climate activist. And whatever resources are available to you, if you have a will, you must find your way to advocate for the right thing. Yeah, that's all from my side, and now over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, there's no right way to be a climate activist. That's such a great message for this group, right? Find your talents and go with it, because it can all make a difference. So what I was really struck by today, and as we were preparing for this event over the past month or so, has really been the different perspectives that you each bring to the climate crisis. And that's really highlighted the need to bring diverse voices to the table and ensure that we are truly listening to everyone's experiences and ideas. The way the climate crisis is affecting me and my community is so different than the way it may be affecting yours. But in the end, it's something that affects all of us, and we need to create collective solutions that work for everybody. So I know that we are eager to hear more from our panel. So I am going to turn it over to Jasmine to lead a conversation with everybody. So Jasmine, over to you.
Thank you, Anna. So I'm very excited about the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with you all. And I'd like to start off by asking, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned through your activism journey?
Andy, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I was wondering whether we will be like called out on, or it will be like a volunteering sort of thing. So I was double guessing myself. But of course, I'd love to go first, and then I'd love to hear what other lessons the other panelists will have to share. And I think I've learned a lot, and I especially resonated with what Zainab said right now about recognizing that maybe you don't fit the mold of what a traditional activist will look like, but just finding ways to get involved is equally as important, and making use of your talents as well. And my favorite quote ever is from a writer that said, "The role of an artist is to make the revolution irresistible." And that's something that I've really kept close to my heart, because I don't consider myself the type of person who like go out to the streets and like with a megaphone like start chanting and mobilize people that way. But I've learned to value myself through other ways. As I mentioned, I'm a storyteller. I love designing. I love film. I love photography. And that's a way I can contribute to that. So a lot of my journey in climate activism was making peace with that. Like, I don't have to be the person that closes the street and just uses the megaphone all the time. I can be the other type of activist that we consider artivists. And yeah, that's probably the biggest lesson I've had in terms of my journey within the movement, and also personal development. I've had such a hard time making peace with that, but I think I finally made my peace with that. So thank you.
So one thing I'd say I've learned is to take away the power that often identity politics and dynamics have. I used to second guess myself a lot, especially living in a foreign country. Am I the right person to be making this sort of noise, even though this is the context to which I relate most, because this is where I've spent most of my life. It was a lot that was going on. I felt like I couldn't take certain opportunities. And a lot of that stuff. And so I really learned, and I was helped up, a very great support system helped me realize that my voice was just as important as the next person's. And I was the right person to be taking up the space. So that would be one of the things that I've learned. And second would be to really just listen. Because often when we're in this space and you're really just trying to make a change, you often sort of close your ears to what everybody else has to say, and you're just like, well, this is what needs to happen. But when you take a moment to really listen and digest all the information that comes from all angles, you really grow as an activist, but as a person as well. And so those are, I think, the two main things that I'd say I've taken away from being in this space.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle and Andy. So far, what I'm hearing is that there is a myth of the perfect climate activism or activist, and activism is really about a lifelong lesson, and we continue to develop. So Sadia, I'd love to hear your biggest lessons in your activist journey as well.
So my lesson is like the most important thing I've learned in my working in my community is what I want to add with Zainab, that she said people in our community is not really interested in this kind of topic, and they don't really properly understand what exactly happening. So same in my community, people actually not interested in what's happening or what will happen in future. But they can be a really bunch of helpful people if they have a proper guideline. So my lesson would be, my lesson is like, I also, as Michelle, when I started doing this kind of stuff, I started to second guess myself. Okay, I'm talking about something, is it really like if I'm conveying the right message or the right information and stuff. So like in my community is actually a large amount of people is uneducated. So they don't actually understand the book stuff and the big stuff we talk about. So what I do in my community is like when I'm talking to them, I talk to them in their language. What they will understand, I make my topic a little easier to understand, so that they can adapt what I'm talking about, or they can at least understand that what I'm talking about, and they can think about it. So yeah, this is my lesson. Thank you.
Zainab, would you like to close our question of what is the biggest lesson you learned through your activism journey?
Yeah, sure. I completely agree with what Sadia said. So just linking it with that part, I think it's very important to not make climate education a fancy thing. Because if we are going to make it, something very fancy, people are definitely not gonna sign up for it. So it's very important to break the science into a layman term and then communicate it with people. Not to use like jargons and some technical terms. And second thing which I learned is that it's very important to pitch the information to people in their culturally relevant context. Because this is how they are going to relate it with their common day practice, whatever they are doing, and kind of related with the local stories and daily stories. So I think this is how you can effectively pitch the technical things in a very understandable manner.
Yeah, definitely. So good and sufficient climate action sounds like meeting people where they are and uplifting them so they can implement good practices in their own life. So another question I have for you all, what are some of the barriers you've faced as you started your activism, and how did you overcome them? Anyone can take the floor.
Happy to start. Oh gosh, I think the biggest barrier for me was the mental block, because I do think that a lot of the times you disqualify yourself from situations just based off of what you feel and what you think and how you feel you will be perceived. It is true that the space tends to be very tokenistic in nature, because it's not everybody who's in the space who has the sort of right intention or the intentions that align with where you're going. So I think that would be the next biggest barrier, apart from the fact that, I used to be my biggest enemy. And then I stepped into the space where I was just like, well, I'm going to learn as I go. And that's what I've been doing for the past several years. And I mean, it's working thus far. So I'm going to keep doing it. But yeah, I think just getting to a space where I realized that I could hold such spaces. I was actually qualified to be a part of certain discussions just by virtue of me having lived a certain experience and having been exposed to certain things. So, yeah.
Oh my God, I relate so much to what Michelle is saying. And I think that's part of growing up as women and what society expects us to be, and just having this perpetual imposter syndrome that you shouldn't be where you are and that you didn't win that because you deserve it. it's something I've definitely struggled with. And another obstacle I faced, because I'm a very deeply emotional person, was just like all the negative emotions involved in realizing that the planet is dying and we need to save it and fix it, and we need to take urgent action now, because if we don't do that, there will be no future. It sounds so dire when you put it like that, and it's something that you truly have to have a support group to help you with, because if you don't, you will just spiral and you will fall into doomerism, and you will will not have enough motivation to keep you going, because someone once said that climate activism, or I guess activism in general, is not a race, but like a huge marathon, like a lifelong marathon, and just you need to have constant support, because those emotions may get the best of you. And as I mentioned, I'm a very visual person, so sometimes when we're on how do you say carretera, when we're on the road, like from one city in Mexico to the next, we obviously pass like a huge stretch of road, right? And because the state I live in is so industrial, like going from one place to the next and just seeing like all the rock quarries and all the mountains being destroyed, and like the air pollution and something, it's so heartbreaking. And I really resonated with what Sadia said, that you need to have people who understand you, like people who understand why it is that we're living like that, and what we can do about it, and how important it is to mobilize other people to do that. Because if we are like a handful of activists, if we just belong to an organization, and I don't know, we're maybe like 10, we cannot do that alone. We need other people to tell representatives, to hold other people accountable. And it's so discouraging once you like make peace with those negative emotions, do something about it, collect signatures, give the bill to the government, and the bill just stays there in the Senate, not doing anything, and they don't vote on it. So how can you like recover from all these like constant we call them like bureaucratic obstacles, like the way the government wants us to do things is just so time consuming. We need something to be done right now, right? And I owe my motivation entirely to my friends, to their joy, to their new perspectives on how we can build a better planet, a safer planet, especially through a concept called solar punk, which I love. And I love learning these types of concepts and stories from them, because obviously they read more than I do. I'm a very movie watcher person. So just like reimagining what our future can be and how together we can build it is something so important. And I truly wouldn't have gotten anywhere without a support group. And meeting people like you is also amazing. And it makes me feel really inspired and really hopeful. So I love tuning into these kinds of events, because sometimes you do need like a pat on the back and like a new friend group, right, to talk about these things. So that's an obstacle I've had to face and how I've recovered from it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Michelle and Andy. For the sake of time, we will have to move on to our next section, but we can start with Sadia and Zainab. So here's a fun question. If you had $1 million grant to further your climate work, how would you spend it?
Yeah, why don't you go first?
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was asked this question in one of my interview, I remember. So I think for me, I'm just thinking about some of my dream projects, which I always wanted to do. So number one thing is that I really want to build this, community-based organic farm. Definitely an urban farming concept thing, where people can, get a space and they can grow their own vegetables and fruit and stuff like that. But definitely, I think it's also a very good business plan for the environmental activists out there, because they can definitely sell those crops and vegetables, fruit, whatever they are growing, and get a revenue out of it. So if any investors are listening out there, I think they can contact me. And I think second, a project which I really want to like do at some point in my life is to conduct this province-based capacity building, or I would say advocacy activities. Because as of now, the concept, or I would say this theme which everyone is forming, is that we will have a very fancy conference, or consultation session in one of the very posh area in the city, where all these people and speakers will come, they will speak, get some recommendations, go back, and then there is nothing. I always wanted to do this project where we can go to some such marginalized communities, take all the experts with us in those areas, and then maybe have some training modules, train those people, capacitate those people, hire local people for all the planning, so that we are also supporting their livelihood. And in a way, we can have like this on a rotational basis. For example, if we are doing it in one province in 1 month, we can go to another province and then come back to see how it has basically impacted and changed the lives of people. So I think, yeah, these are two of my dream projects, which I always wanted to do, and I believe Sadia is not in the meeting. Probably she got dropped out.
I think we lost her. Hopefully she'll come back, because we need to hear her $1 million idea. Michelle, do you want to go ahead and go next?
Yes, I'm thinking where to start. So I don't believe that things exist in silos. So if I truly had $1 million to advance my climate activism, it would be multifaceted, from education to technology. As you heard in the beginning, I'm a computer science major. I really do believe that climate action also lies in building skills and people who are aware and can apply their skills. For instance, I'm trying to find the intersection between data science and computer science. So data science and environmentalism, and then exist there, because I will be a woman in STEM, but I'll also be an environmentalist. So if I did have that kind of money, I would do that. And the second thing that I would do is, currently I'm working on a women girls empowerment project, which aims to address period poverty, as well as the lack of skills, particularly in STEM for women. And so it would be great, because then that way we could talk about, one would be mental health, the second would be reproductive health, particularly menstrual health. And in those sort of spaces would be able to empower people to also become facilitators, because I do believe I'm a starter of ideas. I can't always carry them. So the more facilitators are there, the more the movement grows, essentially. So yeah, and the last thing would be starting a bursary fund for average students, because that is absolutely needed. It's not everybody who can get A's, especially with the pandemic and everything we've just been through. People don't have mental capacity. So it would be incredible to do all those things that I've just mentioned.
Very good use of such a large grant. Sadia, I don't know if you can unmute yourself and share your ideas. That would be great. Let's start with Andy then.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'd love to expand the storytelling lab to different parts of the continent. I'm particularly interested in how people from the global south are adapting to the climate crisis, how they're leveraging indigenous knowledge and traditions to mitigate and adapt to the crisis. So I think there's such value in sharing those stories with the world, as I mentioned. And they're already doing amazing work, but they either don't have enough funding or are not amplified enough because their stories are simply not heard. They're battling the spotlight for like a million other stuff in the traditional media. So I'm very passionate about training these members of these communities to share their own stories. Of course, I would love to make documentaries and films from all of them, but I think there's much more value in them recognizing their value of their own voice, their own stories, their communities, their knowledge, and portraying that to the world through different mediums, right? Like film, journalism, art, painting, data visualization, like Michelle mentioned. I think that's amazing. I love seeing how data can be transformed into something truly attractive and understandable for many people. So I think there's such value in sharing those. And so with $1 million, I have complete faith that we can maybe like do an art piece from like every country in South America, North America, or something like that. I know it's so wild to think about that, but of course, eventually I'd love to tackle the whole world, but let's start with America and then we'll work through that.
Yeah, that's a great way to build bridges, definitely. And in the spirit of climate action, I hope we can hear from Sadia later about her plans. But these were such fun answers, such good insight from all of you. And hopefully that helped inspire some funders out there.
Let's give Sadia one more chance to unmute.
Hi.
There we go.
Anna.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Extremely sorry. My Wi-Fi connection is messing with me.
That's okay. Go ahead.
So, sorry, I cannot turn on my camera. So it'll be a whole different problem then. Okay, so 1 million, wow. If I have the chance to have 1 million, then I'd like to do some work with my project Art Can Initiative. As I mentioned earlier, that we work with the local farmers and we talk to them, we educate them about different methods and the fertilizer they use, it's harmful for our planet, and they can use something better and something natural. So yeah, if I have the 1 million, then I'll gather some selected people to do research on this stuff, that what natural remedies they can use so they don't harm our planet, and they can grow healthy vegetables, not fertilizer stuff. I don't actually like those stuff. What I believe is fertilizer makes everything taste different. It tastes funny. So yeah, I'll work on that, and I'll work on the different methods of vertical garden. And in my community, especially southern Bangladesh, southern part of Bangladesh, here is land and water ratio is water is the biggest ratio. Like here is river, like so many rivers, and land is like so small stuff. And so I'll learn different methods of using the floating garden. So that's the main thing I'd like to learn, that a floating garden. How can we use water as our land? So yeah, this I'll try to do. Thank you.
So many interesting ideas, and I really hope that we've got a funder or a philanthropist in our audience who's ready to invest $4 million, because I think we've got some real solutions here. So as we close out this session, I would like to thank our audience for joining us today, and the Skoll Foundation for creating the space for us to gather. And I'd really like to thank all of our panelists for really authentically sharing their stories with us. I learned so much from this group, and I'm so glad that we had the opportunity to connect and just learn from one another. As you guys have all pointed out, climate justice, social justice, and gender justice cannot be achieved by just one person, one leader, one idea, or an initiative. takes a community, and it's going to take the fresh ideas and the perspectives of young people. So I want to just leave the audience with this, that we need to really take the responsibility to make sure that young leaders have a seat at the table whenever possible. So thank you all. I am just so glad to have had you here with us today, and I hope you have a really wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Anna. Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Bye.